Today's scripture comes from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. And both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited her people, or his people, and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. This is the reading of the word of God.
We're in part 3 of this series, and I know I said to you last week that I wasn't going to do this part 1, 2, 3 thing, but today it just seemed appropriate that we should do it because I have a nice tight 1, 2, 3 for you. And what we're going to do, we're going through a series on this book. We're going to make our way through this book, and we're going to take our time. And this will be the last time I say this. If you don't know anything much about what the Bible teaches about the subject of justice, I just want to reference this previous sermon series, which was done back in 2020 and 2021. It's on our YouTube channel or our podcast, and I urge you to listen to that if you're interested in this subject matter, okay? Let me go to the next slide. I want to just say this. In the Bible, when God teaches on justice, it's said repeatedly again and again, He cares about 3 classes of people: the fatherless, widows, and what the Bible calls sojourners, which basically means those who are foreigners, those who are minorities, those who are aliens. Aliens doesn't mean little green men. It means people who are outsiders. You don't belong to us. You're not one of us. So God is interested in these 3 classes of people, and this book is especially about widows and those who are foreigners or aliens or minorities or sojourners. That's the word I'll use, okay? So, one more slide. I want to say this. This book, it's a short book, but it's a tremendously beautiful book. And if you notice, this is already the third message, and we're looking at the same passage again. We're going to do it again next week. There's a lot going on in these 18 verses, but in these 4 short chapters of this book, it's like a window into a lot of the Bible. And I want to use this series as a way to try to teach you how to see the Bible, how to read the Bible. Some of you have been Christians a long time. Some of you maybe only been a Christian for a short period of time. But a lot of you, if you've been a Christian for a while, some of you are embarrassed because you don't know much about the Bible and you don't know how to read the Bible. And I especially want to help you with this series to help you to read the Bible. I want this series to last a long, long time so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe you have kids, and you could say, let's go through this series 5 years from now, and parents, you could use this to teach your children how to read the Bible. Maybe if in the future, if somebody comes into your life who is a new Christian, you can use this series to teach them how to read the Bible, okay? So that's another important purpose I have in this series. Okay, let's get into it. Part 1, the shocking and stunning alien. Like I said, I could have said the shocking and stunning sojourner, but I want to emphasize she's a different ethnicity. She is of a different people, and she's really quite shocking, right? Part 2, illuminating the Old Testament. I'm going to teach you a little something about how to read the Bible. Illuminating the Old Testament, and thus helping you to see the whole Bible. And part 3, hope for the alien or foreigner or sojourner. Okay? Let's go to part 1, the shocking and stunning alien. Let's go through this passage one more time, and I'll try to go through it briefly on the things that we've already kind of covered. And if you missed the previous messages, I urge you to listen to those. It'll help you to track with what's going on, okay? Because I'm not going to be able to say everything all over again, so I'll just try to say certain things briefly, okay? Verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So it's a famine, which means times are really, really bad, that people could starve and die. And so this family, they go from a place which is very much Israel, Bethlehem, which isn't very far from Jerusalem, and then they immigrate to another portion called Moab. And as I shared with you last week, and I'll share with you a little bit more today, that's not something you would do. It is not a culture and a people that you would normally want to go live with and settle with. They're rather evil people, and it could actually be dangerous to go live there. Okay? Verse 2. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. Like I said, they're very Jewish. They're really of Israel. And as you all know, Bethlehem is an important place. It's not considered an important place at this time in history, but it will be considered very important later, and certainly we know after Jesus. But it becomes very important just in a few generations, okay? And it's because of this story. They went to the country of Moab and remained there. Verse 3. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives, and I'm highlighting that because the Bible repeatedly will tell you they're Moabites. They were in Moab, and again, any ancient Israelites who heard this story, they would go, oh, they would go, that's bad. That's not good. So that refrain, I want you to hear that, and we're going to hear this in kind of 21st century. We just don't understand this context, and I want you to feel the weight of this, okay? The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, so not a short period of time. And both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So this, biblically, is the definition of a widow. If you lose your husband, I know today we would say you're a widow, so technically we are what you would call a widow, but that isn't what the Bible would say you're a widow. If you lose your husband, but you still have your son, in ancient Israel, they would not consider you a widow. Isn't that strange? Why? Because you're cared for. Because your son would take care of you, would provide for you, would protect you. Your son would become the head of the household. He would become the protector and provider for his mother, and she would be safe. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now everybody knows she's a widow. Now we're talking about a justice issue. And we also know she's in big trouble. Widows are very much in danger in this culture and in this time. They're physically in danger. She could pretty much just straight up starve and die. And it's even worse because she is a widow and she's not in her own country. So it's even worse. And she's in a foreign country of a culture that Israel would consider evil. So now we've gotten this verse, total disaster has occurred, okay? Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab. Can you feel that repetition? She's not home. That Yahweh, and I put Yahweh in there, typically in English, it's translated the Lord, but I'm giving you the most direct translation. Every time you get that capital L-O-R-D, the Lord, the name of God is given. And I just want to say a little something just briefly about this. The reason we keep doing, English translators don't put his name in there, but instead put the Lord in there, and that's actually the way we kind of operate in American culture. We keep calling him the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, is because Jews, even to this day, won't say his name. Because they consider his name so sacred that you shouldn't say it. But it doesn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that you can't say his name. It doesn't say that. That's a Jewish cultural tradition. It actually repeatedly says his name, and people keep saying his name all throughout the Bible. So if we're going to be biblical, you should actually just say his name. And actually, it's quite important because other people have their gods, and they have a name for their God, which I'm going to get to really soon. And the God of Israel has a name. So if you believe in that God, you're not just believing in God. In America, we'll say, I believe in God. And generally, throughout American history, we mean the God of the Bible. But everywhere else in history, when you're talking about God, they're going to say, what God? Which God? What's the name? In every other culture, they want to know the name of the God you worship. So in the Bible, it's very explicit. It's Yahweh. And you'll see in this story, it becomes very, very important. Okay? Now let me show you this map. Show this to you last week. Where's Moab? It's on the other side of the Dead Sea. So over there on the left there, that's Judah. That's the southern portion of Palestine, of Israel. And that's like the important portion because that's where Jerusalem is. Okay? And that's not an easy journey. You're not. If you cross the river, you're in another territory. And then over there is Moab. And so they've gone pretty far. And so when she hears that there's food over there back in her home country, of course she's going to want to go there. So one, we're not going to starve, so hopefully there's food over there. And two, well, it'll be a lot safer to be with my people, my tribe, my culture. And Naomi is actually making a very wise decision. Not every culture has provision, has some law, has some way to take care of widows. Israel does, Moab probably did not. God demands in his laws that widows are cared for in a certain specific way, which we'll get to later on in this book. So she understands that in her people, that there may be some who are righteous, who will follow God's laws, and there's some who won't, and they won't. But she'll go, let's go back there, and at least we'll have a fighting chance, even though I'm destitute. Okay? So she makes this journey back, and it's not easy, as you can see. On foot, that's going to take some time. Okay? Let's go to verse 7. So she set out from the place, this is Naomi, where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return each of you to her mother's house. So go back. That's what she's saying. May Yahweh, she says his name. So she doesn't talk like, like I'm going to be nice, and she's not politically correct like we are today. Like she doesn't talk about their God as if their God is a real God, because she doesn't believe their God is a real God. So she's not going to reference their God, and by the way, their God is a name which I'll tell you very soon about. She calls upon her God, which she believes is the only God. So may Yahweh deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. So apparently, they were good to her. They were good to her sons. They were good wives. So that's interesting. So I want you to say right there, that might have been, interesting. To a lot of Israelites, they would have said, but Moabites are a bad and dirty people. So I guess these Moabite women, they weren't that bad. That would have been news, quite frankly. So that's the first thing I want you to understand. So I want you to feel what this is like. This is a book that's in the Bible. All throughout Israelite history, they know the Moabites are wicked and terrible people. This book is going to teach Israelites you can't just prejudge them. As a people, yeah, their reputation is deserved. But there are some who are individuals, they may be better than you think. And they may be filled with a righteousness and a grace that's more than even your own people. And this is the first thing I want you to hear today. This is in the Bible. If you're the kind of person that looks at a person and then you just size them up according to however you size them up, one of the ways that we size up people is, of course, according to ethnicity and skin color. Super common in America. I actually think America is becoming more racist today than it was when I was a young man. I hate it. And it's all these people that say racism is really bad. I think they're actually some of the most racist people I know. And so you want to know how does the Bible handle something like this? So it's very rational for the Israelites to think that the Moabites as a people are a wicked people, because they are. But here we go. Individual Moabites, some of them apparently could be pretty good. And isn't that the way it really is? That's how life really is. So here's one of the first things I want to say to you. If you hear some narrative, it's on YouTube or on TikTok or Instagram or on the news, or you even get it from your professor, and they just tell you these people are like this, please don't just operate inside of that. Here's the Bible telling you, wicked people, everybody knows they're wicked people, but some of them are not wicked. Isn't that interesting? The Bible is saying that. The Bible is giving you a very truthful presentation of how reality actually works. Let's go to verse 9. Yahweh grant, this is still Naomi's talking, may my God, the real God, Yahweh, grant that you may find rest, each of you, where? In the house of her husband. So which is to say, basically go back. And what she's saying is go back and marry somebody else. This is how women had security back then. And I'll go more into this in a later message. So she is just saying very sensible things. Go back and go to your own people and get married again. Then she kissed them and they lifted up their voices and wept. They were close. I want to just say a little something about this. I'm Korean American. Okay? I'm sure this is a really common problem in a lot of cultures. Okay? You watch, one of my favorite shows is Everybody Loves Raymond. And Everybody Loves Raymond is about the tension between Raymond's wife and his Italian mother-in-law. Okay? That's like in like almost every single episode. You know what? It's like that's Korean life too. There are plenty of Korean mothers-in-laws. If they would separate from their daughter-in-law, they wouldn't cry. There'd be no crying because they hate each other. Right? But between these two very opposed cultures, there's actually real love between these women. Isn't that an incredible thing? Between the mother and these two Moabite daughters-in-laws. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." What they're saying is crazy. They know that inside of Israelite culture, she's desperate. They actually know they're in big trouble too. But they know that if they stay with her, she won't be in as much danger. But if they go to a foreign land, they're really throwing their whole life away. So what they're saying there is nuts. Verse 11. Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should stay, I have hope. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying?" So, again, I'll say more about this later. What is generally the hope for a woman who is in this situation? To remarry. She's saying, you're still young enough, get married again. If you stay with me, that won't happen. So everything she's saying is completely reasonable. It's actually a piece of remarkable love from Naomi as her mother-in-law, because she should want at least one of them to stay with her because it'll be better for her. But she's saying, go. No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of Yahweh has gone out against me. And then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Now here we go. We have these two women. The Bible portrays them both as good daughter-in-laws. So some have thought, maybe Orpah's not that good, and Ruth is good. But actually, I don't think that's what the Bible is trying to say. The Bible is saying that they're both good. But Ruth is extraordinary. That's what the Bible is saying. Orpah did what was sensible. She went back to her culture. And she'll probably end up getting remarried to a Moabite man and then get on with her life. But Ruth did what was nuts. From every kind of worldly, sensible way in her culture of the time, she's throwing away her future. And she's doing this for the sake of her mother-in-law, whom she loves. So Ruth is an utterly extraordinary woman. And she's not an Israelite. Anybody in all of the history of Israel, when they read this, you get to this part, and it is a shocking thing. They know that many Israelite women would not do this. But here's a Moabite woman. She is willing to do this. Now let's go back to a quick recap from some of what I taught you last week. Why does it matter that she is a Moabite? Let's go next. All right? Next slide. If you go in the Bible, you get the origin of where these people came from. And it goes back to Genesis chapter 19, and I won't go into the details of it, but here we go. The Moabite people come from one of the two sons of Lot. And Lot is the nephew of Abraham. So if you go back generations on generations, Abraham is the one chosen whose descendants would become Israel, and from whom the Messiah would come, and the whole world would become redeemed and blessed. But his nephew Lot, they separated, and his nephew Lot settled into an extremely wicked city, and you know it. That city was Sodom. And God decided to burn that whole city down, and it was an extremely sexually depraved and gross city. And so when they fled, his wife died, but they were in the hills, and the two daughters said, well, how are we going to get husbands? You know what we ought to do? So one of them had the bright idea to get dad drunk and to sleep with dad to get pregnant. And then, as if that wasn't a horrible enough thing, the other daughter decided to do the same thing, and Lot was so drunk that he ended up impregnating both his daughters. And one of them, so you saw, there was one that was Ammon, was the people above, and the people below were Moab. One of them had the son, and he was the father of the Ammonites. The other one had a son who was the father of the Moabites. That's the history. I'm just going to say a little something about this. You're like, well, just because they were wicked back then, does that still mean that that wickedness continues? And the answer is yes and no. I don't know if you understand this about history. I'm a big fan of history. One of the strange features of history is however a nation starts, however anything important starts, the original culture has a strange way of lasting. Did you know that? It's actually really, really important. So if you start a new church, did you know that the founder of that church, whoever the first members, it's really important who those first members are. Did you know if you start a company, whoever starts that company with the vision of that company, it tends to last a while. Even a lot longer than you think. And in America, it's been more than 200 years, and yet still the founding fathers still have tremendous influence over our country. Yes? Well, it's still like that. All around the world, it's like that. That doesn't mean every single person in Moab is a wicked person when filled with sexual depravity, but it's still pretty normal in their culture. Now, let me tell you one more thing. This is from history. So let's go to the next slide. How were the Moabites known? They were known as worshipers of a god named Chemosh. So this is why the name of the god matters. We know the name of their god. Their god is Chemosh. And let me tell you something very important about what historians, so this is not Christians, this is just historians. Secular historians report this. So this is what Chemosh worshippers were known as, that they practiced human sacrifice. This is normal for Moabites. They would conquer a people, and they would say, our God wants blood, and we're not going to kill our people, so we'll kill these people. So in their worship sacrifices, they would murder these other people, so their God would bless them and make them rich and prosperous. Totally normal in Moab. And there are some instances where they would sacrifice their children. So, when I tell you they're gross and horrible people, they are. I think pretty much most cultures throughout history would go, yeah. And Moabites and Israelites did not get along, as you can imagine. If we had a neighbor to our nation and they sacrificed children and they sacrificed, let's say, some of our citizens if they were conquered us in a war, yeah, I think we would probably hate them too. Well, let me tell you, God hated these people. But it's really interesting. And this is what's so incredible about this book. But God loved Ruth. God can hate a people for their wickedness, and yet His grace could be upon some of their citizens. And that's so much what this book is about. Verse 15. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods." Can you feel that? You can go do that too. Return after your sister-in-law. So this is what Naomi is saying to Ruth. Go be sensible like Orpah. Go back to your gods. But this is so extraordinary. Verse 16. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." She's speaking covenantal words. She's not just saying something nice. She's basically sealing a promise for her whole life. And she's sealing herself to God. Not just to God. She names that God, the God of Yahweh. So you know what this is saying? She may be a Moabite, but she loves Yahweh maybe even more than the Israelites do. She's saying, that God, your God, He will be my God. And I know in your people, this is what the daughter-in-law is supposed to do. I'm going to do that. And then, this is the part I really want you to get. It's so incredible. May Yahweh do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. So here's what she's doing. She is covenanting herself to her mother-in-law, and a covenant is a sacred vow. And so she's saying, I'm going to bless you by being with you no matter what. But here's how you know when a covenant is serious business. You also will confer curse upon yourself if you fail the covenant. So she's basically saying this: if I don't do this, may Yahweh do something really bad to me. Verse 18. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, which is another way of saying, okay, after what she just said there, wow, she's not going to change her mind. She just literally incurred the curse of God. She will not fulfill this. So she didn't say anything more. Now the story is really beginning. Okay? Now let's take a quick little, I don't know, like, it's almost a tangent, but it's helpful. Let's go to part 2. I want to help you see something in the Old Testament. And I'm going to give you a principle that every Christian should know. So I'm actually really glad that our middle schoolers are here today. If you learned this in middle school, you should practice and remember this for all of your life. It's actually a tremendously important principle of reading the Bible. So I'm going to give you a quote. Here we go. The New Testament is in the Old, concealed. The Old Testament is in the New, revealed. Let me say that one more time. The New Testament, all the New Testament, is actually already in the Old Testament. You just don't quite see it. It's kind of concealed. And all the Old Testament, it is in the New Testament, and it shows up. It'll be revealed. There are a lot of people today who just somehow think that, like, so this is actually a really common heretical idea, that the New Testament God is a God of grace, and He's kind and loving. And the Old Testament God, because He burns down people for being wicked, like in Sodom, that He's a mean God, right? That's false. There's only one God, and He's the same God in both Testaments. And this is one of the great, great Bible readers of all time, Augustine. And this is very, very It's such incredible wisdom. But you know where Augustine got this idea? It's not because he's a clever guy. He's like, I'm so smart. I'm going to teach you. Now, he was incredibly brilliant. He's probably smarter than pretty much everybody in this room, okay? But you know where he got this idea? The New Testament is in the Old concealed. The Old Testament in the New revealed from the Bible. So let me share with you just two places where it is taught explicitly. Next, there's Hebrews chapter 10, verse 1. For since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come. Let me say it a little differently. Since the Torah, in other words, all the laws and the ways that God formed His relationship, which is covenant. And if you fail the covenant, you'll incur curse, exactly as Naomi understands, but it is a shadow of the good things to come. You guys understand what a shadow is? There is a light, and then there's a shadow. If there is no light, there is no shadow. You know what Hebrews is saying? That in the Old Testament, under the law, under the Torah, with the covenant, that was like a shadow. And then the real light is yet to come. That's what this passage is saying. Instead of the true form, or instead of the true, by word form, it means essence. Since the law has but a shadow of the things to come, instead of the true essence of these realities. So what it's saying is, back then, in the Torah, in the covenant, it's still not the fullness is there, but there's a fundamental essence there. But we haven't quite seen it yet. The Old Testament is like shadow. The New Testament is light. All that is in the New Testament is already in the Old Testament, as Augustine says, concealed. It's already there. It's kind of like a shadow. But then, when we get to the full substance of the important stuff, which is Christ, it'll be lit up, it'll be illuminated, revealed. Let's go to the next verse. I'll show you just one more place. This is Colossians 2. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath. So in other words, it's saying, there are certain rules. Do this, don't do this, don't do that. So many people think that's how human righteousness works. It's based on rules. That is not how the Bible actually operates. It isn't how the Bible operates in the New Testament. Guess what? It is also not how the Bible operates in the Old Testament. The rules are not the ultimate thing. Why? These are a shadow of the things to come. You see it? There's something more that is yet to come. Just the rules, if you're just on the rules, but the substance, the essence, something really, really at the core from God, that's of Christ. That's the way Colossians 2 is making the exact same point as Hebrews chapter 10. And let me say it now applied to the book of Ruth. The Israelites know you are not to marry those people because they're wicked idolaters. And it's probably dangerous for you. And it's a good chance that you will follow their ways instead of them following your ways. That's the rule. That's the law. But there's a deeper core substance, which is, will you cling to this God, to Yahweh? Will you know His grace, His justice, His mercy, His righteousness? Will you know His faithfulness? That's the deeper substance. And the pathway to that deeper substance ultimately is in Christ. Now, Christ is not revealed yet, but here's what's so extraordinary in this book. The rule, the law, the Torah, which is still more like the shadow, says don't marry those people. But here is one who is not of Israel. She's Moabite, and she's going right into the center substance. I will cling to Yahweh. I will throw away my life if necessary if I will cling to Yahweh, which also means I'll cling to you. And thus Naomi finally realizes, okay, Okay. Naomi is a woman of the substance. She's a woman of the light. She's absolutely extraordinary. One of the things that we have to learn is, in this book, I want to ask you this question. Will you be like her? Will you see her? Let's go to part 3. I want to close with a reflection on this that'll take us to the gospel. And I want to ask you this question. The Israelites, they know things about Moab, the Moabites. They know they're Chemosh worshipers, and they know that's horrible and wicked. So that's true. It's sensible. But did they know that God was going to do something extraordinary in one of the Moabite women? Could they see what God is doing in her, which is even better than maybe like the faith of many of their own? That's the real substance of the heart of God. The real substance of the heart of God is, I am a certain kind of God. Will you see me? Will you know me? Will you love me? Will you cling to me over all things? Anything in the world? And if you do, you will have life. And if you don't, it doesn't matter what your culture is, you won't. Here's one of the things I want to ask you. You know, we're about to have this incredible opportunity to go onto that campus over there, called Bishop Elementary School. The majority of the kids on that campus are not probably your ethnicity. They're not of your culture. They're not of your class. When you look at them, how will you see them? How will you see them? It is deeply human to size up a person and you go, okay, they're these kind of people. You know, it's practically impossible not to prejudge. That's where the word prejudice comes from, prejudge. It's impossible not to prejudge people. Because if you can't have some kind of shortcut for like sizing somebody up, well, how do you know if they're dangerous? Like today, it's like the women are being told to like treat a trans woman who's really a man as if he is a woman. Well, honestly, that's really stupid. Because what if he, because that's what we should really call it, that's his real pronoun, by the way, okay? He is dangerous. All women should know that men could be a danger to them. So he can call himself she. The first thing you ought to know is whether it's he or she. That's just plain wisdom. Ladies, if you don't know how to do that, I'm sorry, you're going to put yourself in harm's way. So our culture, what it's telling you to do is completely insane. So it's impossible not to prejudge and at least see where somebody's from. But now, I want to challenge you. Could you have hope for somebody of a different ethnicity, a different culture, a different tribe? Can you look at that person, maybe it'll be a child from that campus, and say, maybe this kid will be Ruth? Can you do that? Can you do that? For years, at the previous church that we were planted at, we went on a Native American reservation. And I saw some of our team members, majority of them were Asian American, talk to Native American kids. And some of them looked down on these kids because they're poor and treated them like they were poor kids, and I'm your savior, I'm here to help you because I'm the rich person from Silicon Valley. I know stuff and you don't. But some of our team members looked at these poor children. Many of them, dad was in prison, mom was a drug addict, and started thinking about maybe this child in the future could be a leader for these people. Maybe this child could meet Yahweh and have the life of Yahweh, the covenant of Yahweh, the life of Christ in him or in her and become somewhat extraordinary. In other words, some of our team members looked at the Native American kids as a potential Ruth. If we're going to be a church of real justice, I call on everybody here in Revive. Yes, do what is sensible. Size a person up. And you probably know real things about this person's culture, fine. Okay? But then, let the gospel come into your heart. And say, wait a second, maybe this kid will be Ruth. Here's how I want to close this message. Let's go to the next verse. Oops. There we go. I hope by now, everybody in Revives knows this. If you have been in our church even for not too long, I hope you know this verse. I hope you memorize this verse. We went through a series, and I kept telling you this verse. This is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If you want to know the substance, the central thing of God, it is His love. All the laws, we worship on Sunday, you want to wear a tie, you don't want to, who cares about that, okay? All that can change, right? But His love is the central substance that will last forever and ever. Real divine love is like this. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Now let me just say this to you. Isn't that Ruth? Ruth had this kind of love. She had God's kind of love. She was willing to bear this crazy situation. She was able to believe, I'm going to be with my mother-in-law. I'm going to hope that we're going to make it. I'm going to endure all these things, and I'm going to do it with your God because He's going to be my God. And if I say be like Ruth, that's a good piece of wisdom. Well, let me close out the message this way. If we're really honest, we're not Ruth. Most of us don't have anything close to that kind of love. Today, I want to ask you, can you have hope? Two kinds of hope. One, you meet a person from a different ethnicity. Maybe they're poor. Maybe they come from a tremendously broken family. Can you put the hope in this child that this girl or this guy could be like Ruth? That's the first hope. I'm going to ask you. Second hope. Can you have hope that you can have that hope? Can you have hope that you could have that hope and you could become like Ruth? And now let me close this message. This book is called Ruth. But now let me give you the gospel out of the book of Ruth. Ruth is an extraordinary woman who has divine love. It's practically supernatural love. It's so supernatural, it has to be from Yahweh. Well, so here she is. She is from a foreign country. She's an alien. She's not of us. And yet, she would come to be one of us. She would say, I'm not an Israelite, but I'm going to go there and be with you. I will receive the rejection of your people. I will go live amongst your people. I will never leave your people or leave you. And if they reject me, I'll receive that so I could love you and be there for you. Doesn't that sound like somebody you know? We were a wicked people. We were a racist and prejudiced people. We were a people that's always doing things according to my money, my worldly wisdom, and whatever only makes sense to me. And then the worship of Yahweh, well, we'll just kind of sacrifice that. But there was one from another country, and he was an alien to us. And he came into our world to be with us, to live with us. I will lodge with you. I will tabernacle with you. I will be incarnate for you. I will suffer for you. There was one who is the substance himself. There's one greater than Ruth, and she points to him, and that is Jesus. You may not have hope the way she has hope for other people. You may not even have hope for yourself that you can have that kind of hope for other people. But you know what? There's one who is like Ruth, who is better than Ruth. He has come. He died the death you and I deserve for all the hopeless, loveless, unjust ways that we live, so that he can hope in us and believe in us, endure all things for us, bear all things for us, so we can become like him. We can become like Ruth. We're going to go to the table of the Lord today, and I call on you to ask for the heart of Christ to give you the heart of Ruth. He came, one greater than Ruth, came so that he could give us this kind of love. Not so that he can only give it to us, so that we can give it to others. And we can give our city, we can give our neighbors of other cultures, of other ethnicities, not our racism, not our prejudice, not our condescension, but a love that is from him. Let's pray. Lord, there are extraordinary, quite even unbelievable things in the Bible. Forgive us for the cheap ways that we try to make your Bible comfortable. Forgive us for all the ways that we don't take your word seriously, and we take these words and make them into something cheap and sentimental. But help us not to live according to the Moabite ways of America. May we not be American Moabites. Instead, may we go round to our neighbors who are our Moabite American neighbors and watch you do an incredible thing. Turn some of them into Ruth. Today we go to your table and we confess to you we are clearly not like Ruth. We are clearly not like you, Jesus. But we thank you that because of you, Jesus, your blood washes away our racism and our selfishness. And by your Spirit, we can have the heart of Ruth. We can have your heart. So as we go to the table today, pour out your Spirit on us and do an extraordinary work to the glory of your name. Amen.